Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern Time, we come to you, to our online students, to our classroom students, to all the alumni of the Tampa School of Real Estate, and all of our potential students that are out there watching online as well. We come to you through Facebook, YouTube, our Success Center. That's 12 noon every Wednesday. And what we're talking about today, the whole purpose of the show is to help our students understand in much greater detail the more technical side of the real estate industry, the things that you need to know to pass your exam, as well as to better understand the real estate industry that we live and work in. So we've got a great show for you guys today. It's another one on coming up with value. And I know we've done a lot of episodes on coming up with value, but that's because there's so much you need to know about value. It's a huge part of your exam as well. If you're trying to take your Florida real estate license exam to get your real estate license, that's like an 8% section just on the valuation process and appraising property and all the different methods that factor into that. So really excited to talk to you today about the cost approach to value. So with the cost approach to value, basically, there's a few key steps when you're figuring out the value of a property. And first and foremost, when you're using the cost approach to value, number one is figuring out the cost. So number one is you find the cost, but here's the thing, of the building. So you figure the cost of the building. Now this was formerly called the cost depreciation approach, and depending on who it is that you talk to, they may still call it the cost depreciation approach. And the reason why I like to call it the cost depreciation approach is number one, you find the cost of the building. Now if you're trying to find the value of a brand new building, a completely fresh brand new building, this is really all you need to do. Just step one, finding the cost of the building. We're going to talk about how to come up with that. But the second step in this cost approach when you're finding value is more geared towards if you're dealing with an older property, a property that isn't brand new. Because if it is brand new, if it's a brand new building, you're done at step one basically, aside from adding in the value of the land. But if it's an older property, you then need to apply depreciation. So step one is finding the cost of the building. Step two is to apply depreciation. And our third step is to find the value of the land. And the fourth step is add the land. So that's really four steps. Now, in reference to some of the other methods you might be able to use to come up with the value of the property, this is definitely something you're going to want to know if you're trying to study for your exam. The cost approach, very likely to show up in some way on your exam. It's a very highly tested on question. And this is a practical way in the real world if you're trying to find the value of a property for more special circumstances. Now, usually your go-to for most cases is going to be the sales comparison approach, the comp approach, where you're looking at comparable sales and using those comparable sales to make an estimate of the value of what that property would sell for. So that's usually your main approach to finding the value to a property. Now, the cost approach, this is maybe if you don't have comparable sales to deal with. If you don't have any comparable sales to look against in these properties here, and you can't say, oh, well, this one sold for this much, that means this one would sell for this much. If you don't have comparable sales data, the comparable sales approach won't do you much of good. So that's where the cost approach could come in. Now, depending on this could be a very accurate method to find the value of the property, or it could be a very quick and easy, very kind of vague way to find a rough estimate of the value. So it's really nice because it allows you to kind of estimate the value quickly, especially this first part for figuring out the cost of a building. If you're thinking about building a property, building some sort of house, this first step is crucial for being able to kind of understand that process and what that looks like, and that could apply in a lot of different cases. Our third approach to value, this is going to be more geared towards investors, the income approach. The income approach is going to be when you're trying to generate income from the property. So you have these three different approaches, the comparable sales approach, the cost approach, and the income approach. And really all three of them are going to give you great indicators on what this property is really worth to different types of people. In this case here, we're figuring the cost approach. So what it's going to cost to build this property brand new, then applying depreciation if we're dealing with an older building that we're trying to find the value for, figuring out the value of the land or the value of the site that the property is sitting on. And last one is going to be adding in the value of the land. So these basically are the 4 steps that you need to know for the cost approach to figuring out value. So let's break this down now to step one, finding the cost of the building. So how do you find the cost of a new construction building? How do you figure out what it's going to cost to build some sort of brand new building, completely brand new from scratch, you're building it? So there's a couple different ways you could go about finding how much it costs per square foot, because this is all usually based on per square foot methods. So you'd find the square footage of the building. That's going to be one of the key things that you need to do. Since we're going on based on per square foot, you're going to need to find the square footage. And then you're going to need a cost per square foot. A building cost per square foot. So how much it costs for square foot. So let's say it costs like $90 a square foot. And then if you got 100 square feet, that'd be what, about $9,000 there. So these two pieces of information are crucial, but with this, especially if you could get a very accurate cost per square foot, if this number is very accurate, maybe if you're dealing with a builder will probably be able to give you a fairly accurate cost per square foot. There's a lot of ways you can go about this. If you're trying for accuracy, if you're trying to find the most accurate value of the property, this cost per square foot, I would recommend talking to some sort of builder, talk about who is constructing this property. If we're just trying to get an idea of maybe how much this would cost, Google's your best friend with this, because you could Google the cost of different aspects of the property. Now, if we think of a house, if we think of some sort of house that maybe we're building here, we might have our living area, but on top of the living area, you might have a garage. And a garage isn't going to cost as much to build as living area would cost to build. Living area is going to be much more expensive. There's more insulation, there's nicer finishes, there's baseboards, there's crown molding, there's nice light fixtures. A garage is going to be pretty basic. It probably doesn't even have any carpet or tile or anything along those lines. So the garage is going to cost less. And if you're trying to find a very accurate valuation, you're not going to use an overall cost per square foot for the entire property. You're not going to use cost per square foot for the entire property. You're going to use cost per square foot based on these individual areas. Maybe there's also a little porch, or we'll call it a porch. Porch up front, maybe a patio in the back. Maybe within the property itself, there's a utility room, some sort of laundry room. So what you're doing basically is getting the square footage of each of these individual parts of the property and then figuring out the cost for each one of these pieces of the property. So our garage area might only cost, let's say, about $40 a square foot. And let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger here so you guys are able to kind of follow along with all this stuff we're doing here. So what we're going to do again is just lay out our property. So we've got our living area here. We've got our garage. Maybe there's a patio, sunroom, whatever it is. You'll see various different things, and you're just looking at the particular property, finding the dimensions of each one of these, and then basically calculating it all out. So let's look at our dimensions first and foremost here. So let's say that the living area on this property, we've got 40 feet wide by, let's try to keep it to scale here, about 30 feet deep. So we've got 40 feet by 30 feet, but then we also, within here, have utility area that's 10 feet by 10 feet. And now if this is just really kind of complicating things, don't worry. It's going to be just some simple, very simple geometry. I don't even want to use that word geometry because that sounds really intimidating, but it's really not that bad at all. If you know how to find length by width to find the area, what we're going to do with this to take out this area, it's going to be super easy. We've got our garage here. Let's say the garage is, about 20 feet by 20 feet. Nice square garage. And then let's say our patio is, about 15 feet by 10 feet. So we've got all these different areas here. We've got the measurements about all of them, and if you're doing the cost approach to value, this is what you need to do. You need the measurements of each part of the property. So let's say that this living area, this is our most expensive part to build. This is, let's say, $80 a square foot. So we've got $80 a square foot for our living area. For the utility area, let's say the utility area is about a little bit cheaper. Let's say $50 a square foot. So we've got $50 a square foot for the utility area, $80 a square foot for the living room area. Let's say the garage is about $40. And finally, we've got our patio, and the patio is probably going to be the cheapest to build out of all this here. Let's say that this is just going to be about $20 a square foot. So if you're following along with all this stuff here, what we've got is our, let's see, we've got 4 different areas here. We've got our living area. We've got our garage. We've got our utility. And that could be a laundry room or something. The point of this here is this is a cheaper area to build. This utility closet, this laundry room, it won't have the nice finishes that the rest of the living area has in the property. So that's going to be a different cost per square foot for that utility room. And then last, we've got our patio. So we've got these 4 different areas, and we've got our different cost for each one of these areas here. So our different cost for each one of these areas, let's do this in blue so you can see it a little bit better. We've got our living area at $80 a square foot. We've got our garage at $40. We've got our utility at $50. And we've got our patio at $20. And essentially, all it is that we're doing here is taking each one of these costs per square foot, and we're going to multiply it by the actual square footage. So we're going to take the square footage, calculate that all out for each piece of this property, and then what we're going to be left with is the actual dollar cost for each one, and that's going to be finding our reproduction cost of this particular structure. So let's go ahead and start off with our living area. So the living area, we've got 40 feet by 30 feet. So basic length times width, 40 by 30. And that should end up what, 1,200 square feet? Let's just double check that with our calculator. 40 times 30. Yep, 1,200 square feet we're dealing with here. And that's our entire living area here. But remember how I said the utility area. So this length by width is measuring this area by this area and everything basically encapsulated in it. So we've got this utility space that's 10 by 10. So we've got 100 square feet of utility space. Now, since we don't want to double build this, basically, this utility space is an extra. It's not in addition to the property. It's part of this living area that we calculated out to be 1,200 square feet. So what we need to do for the living area is subtract out the 100 from the utility cost. Because this entire area is 1,200 square feet, but out of that 1,200, 100 square feet is the utility area, which is going to be factored in at a different cost. So really, the living area is going to be 1,100 square feet for this area minus the 100 square feet for the utility room. And like I said, that's that fancy geometry that we did right there. We just took the size of this and then just basically popped that out. We just took this out, and then basically what we're left over once we take out that 100 square feet is the remaining 1,100. This whole thing was 1,200, and we just popped out that extra 100, which brought us down to 1,100 square feet. And together, these still add up to 1,200, which is this entire size. But remember, that 100 is the utility space. So that's where this could get a little bit complicated. And if you're dealing with a property, maybe with a utility room, or there's all these other little features, whenever you have something that's going to cost a different price to build per square foot, like I said, the utility closet is going to be a lot cheaper to build than the rest of the living area because it's not finished as nicely as the rest of the living area. The laundry room is probably just real basic. Maybe it doesn't even have baseboards, or if it does, it's not going to have the crown molding, or if it does, it's just a really fancy utility room, which in that case, you probably wouldn't need to differentiate it, but in this case, you do here. Now next we have our garage. Our garage is 20 by 20, so that should give us 400 square feet. So we've got our garage at 400 square feet. And then finally, we've got our patio, which is 10 feet by 15 feet, so we should have 150 square feet. And basically, now that we have the cost per square foot and the square foot for our living area, for our garage, for our utility area, and for our patio, all we're going to basically be doing is just multiplying across. $80 a square feet for 1,100 square feet, $40 a square feet for 400 square feet, $50 a square foot for 100 square feet for our utility area, and then $20 a square foot for our patio at 150 square feet. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to add all this together, and then we're going to go into the crucial second step of applying depreciation. So stick with us. Don't go anywhere. If you guys got questions, send them in the comments so I can help enlighten you in this little weekly mastermind we do at 12 o'clock on Wednesdays, but don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. Tampa 10 years ago is nothing like Tampa today. It's changed dramatically over those years, and that's what's really transitioned this to be the number one healthiest housing market in the entire nation.
Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time, the Tampa School of Real Estate, and really me on behalf of the Tampa School of Real Estate, come to you to help you understand the technical information you need to know to pass your exam, as well as, today we're talking about a super real world topic. This isn't one of those things like, oh, it's only in the course. Really, all the stuff that's taught to you in this pre-licensing course is all stuff that could come up in your daily course of business, depending on what type of real estate it is that you're actually working in here, and how detailed and analytical you're getting with something like coming up with the value for a particular property. And what we've been doing here basically is taking our square footage of this property we drew out here and multiplying it by our cost per square foot of these various areas, because we've got our living room area, the bedrooms, the living room, kitchen, things like that. And you could even break these out even further, because a kitchen is going to be maybe a little bit more expensive to build than just a bedroom. Bedroom's pretty simple, just 4 walls and maybe a ceiling fan in it. So you could break this out and get even more granular with this. And if you're trying to find the most accurate value of the property, that's the great part of this cost approach, is if you have accurate cost per square footages and accurate square footages, you can really come up with a very accurate building cost of a particular property. And this is really important stuff to know if you're a builder yourself, or you're thinking about developing and building out properties, to figure out these costs here, what it's costing you to build, so you can ensure you're going to have some markup and profit when you go to sell these properties. So we've got our living area. It's 1,100 square feet. This area minus the utility room is 1,100 square feet, and it costs $80 per square foot. So when you multiply that out, you should end up with $88,000. So to build this living area here, it would cost us $88,000. Now for the garage, it's $40 a square foot across 400 square feet. So we'd multiply the two of those out, and we should end up with $16,000. So maybe, and you could use this, and that's the greatness about understanding how this works here. Maybe you're thinking about adding a garage onto your property or adding some addition to your property. You could take these cost per square footages and multiply by the square foot you're trying to add to figure out, hey, if we want to add a garage, it's going to cost us $16,000 to build this particular garage. So once you understand this way of coming up with the value and coming up with the building cost, it's applicable in a lot of different ways. So really helpful information that you could use quite a bit in your real estate career, or just throughout your normal course of home ownership, or for investment properties, or whatever it is that you're doing. Our utility area, it's $50 a square foot for the utility area at $100 a square foot, so that's going to give us a cost of $5,000. And then our last one we've got is our patio area, the cheapest one to build, because a patio, maybe we have a little roof over it, a little concrete slab, but nothing too expensive there, so only $20 a square foot for this one. It's 150 square feet, so we're going to multiply the two of those out, and we end up with $3,000. So we've got our 4 different areas on the property. The living room area, which cost us about $88,000. The garage that cost us about $16,000. The utility space that cost us about $5,000. And the patio, which is going to cost us about $3,000. And then when we add these all together, I'm trying to get this in here so you guys can see this all without all the lights glaring all over the place. When we add these all together, we should end up with $112,000 for our building cost. So $112,000 is the total cost of this particular property to build it completely brand new. And this is great. This, like I said, this approach is really applicable if you're trying to find out the cost to make an addition onto your property, or understanding how much it's going to cost to build a home, or anything like that. That's where this one step alone really shines here. Shining like the light shining on the whiteboard here. So that $112,000 gives us a whole idea of what this entire property that we just laid out is going to cost. But now, and this is another way you could use this cost approach, is to actually find the value of an entire property. Because if you've noticed when we're going through this all here, we didn't factor in the land whatsoever. So we didn't factor in the land at all coming up with this value here. So the land isn't included in this. So we're going to add that in at the end. And now the reason why we don't include the land here, because if you're building a brand new property, you would include the land. But if we're not building a brand new property, if we're using this approach to find out how much an older property would cost, if a property is 10 years old, sure, it would cost $112,000 to build brand new, but if it's 10 years old, it's probably still not, that building probably still doesn't have the value of $112,000 because it's probably worn out and broken down a little bit. So that comes into our second step in this cost approach, or in the cost depreciation approach, applying depreciation. So with applying depreciation, what you need, and you need some key numbers here, and this is where, again, you can end up with a very accurate number, or it's a really quick way to make rough estimations with all this stuff here. So once you found out your building cost, brand new for this property, of $112,000, can we try turning off these lights here on that switch there, so that might help us out with the, yeah, there we go, a little bit less glare there. Yeah, there we go. Now we can see I'm a little bit darker, but whatever. All right, yeah, now we're cooking. Cool. So let's go ahead and break this down into our 2 numbers that we need to apply the depreciation. So in order to figure out how much of a property is used, so let's say we've got this little pie chart here that represents 100% of the life of the property. And this is a little bit theoretical here, so you'll have to stick with me on this. Let's say the life on this property, this 100% life, let's say it's maybe 50 years. Now, out of this 50 years, let's say this property is 10 years old. So if it's 10 years old, out of these 50 years, that's going to be roughly about 20% of the property value, or the building value, I should say, that's gone. And that leaves us our remaining 80% of value. So if that brand new cost of $112,000 was our 100%, and out of these 50 years that it's supposed to last, our lifespan, our economic life of the property, let's say that it's 10 years that we have of an age. And we're going to talk about how you could come up with this age number, because you don't always necessarily want to go with exactly how old the property is. That's something we call actual age there, if it's actually 10 years old, but we're going to talk about effective age for basically understanding how old the property seems to be. But if we've used up 10 years, that's this area right here. So we've used up 10 years, which leaves us with 40 years remaining on the property. So if we used up 10 years, we have 40 years remaining out of our 50 years. What we need to figure out is, out of this $112,000 here, what that value is when we take out 10 of the 50 years that we have available. So what you're going to be doing basically, and there's a couple ways to go about this. So we're going to go through a couple different methods to figure out what the depreciation is, number one, and then what the depreciated value is, number two, which is what we're ultimately looking for. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and start just finding the depreciation of the property. So I told you that we used up 20% of the property value, and how you're figuring out that we used up 20% is you're just taking 10 and dividing by 50. So 10 divided by 50 is going to give you 0.20, which is 20%. Meaning we used up 20%. If we use 10 years out of the 50 years this property is supposed to last, we've used 20%. So we would experience 20% depreciation. Now the percentage of depreciation, that's going to help us solve this here and help you understand this better, but that's usually not the number it is that you're looking for. You either want to know what that dollar amount of the depreciation is, not necessarily how much percentage is used up, because you can see that's a very easy calculation, or what you're ultimately probably going to be looking for is the depreciated value, how much this has actually gone down on the property, what our new value is based on it being 10 years old and using up 20% of the years of the property. So we'll take this 20% depreciation, and to find the accrued depreciation, that's the term accrued depreciation. How much depreciation we've added up or accrued over time, you're going to take that 20% and multiply it by 112,000. So we've got our $112,000 that this building would be worth completely brand new, and we're multiplying that by 0.20 or 20%. And when we add that or multiply that out, we're going to end up with our accrued depreciation. So let's pull out our handy dandy calculator here. Do $112,000 times 0.2. That gives us $22,400 of accrued depreciation. So this building that cost $112,000 brand new, since we used up 20% of its life, 10 years out of the 50 years it's supposed to last, we've lost about $22,400 of the building value. And this is very important to know as an investor as well. Typically, the first way to figure out the value of a property as an investor is looking at this from the approach of how much money am I going to make on this? How much cash is this going to flow to me here? What's my NOI going to be on the property? What's the cap rate going to be on the property? Which is all well and good, and that's probably the first thing that you should look at when you're considering investing in a property. But this is another thing you definitely got to look at here, because if you're dealing with an old beat-up property, it might even be more than this that it's costing you every year to keep up with the property. So you want to find this accrued depreciation, how much this value has actually gone down on the particular property here. Now, once you have this accrued depreciation number, there's a couple ways you could go about finding the depreciated value. So our depreciated value is the $112,000 minus the $22,400 that we've lost. So we take the brand new cost, $112,000 would be brand new if we were to build this completely brand new. We lost $22,400 in value to the property due to depreciation, and that's going to give us our depreciated value. That's what this number is called, the depreciated value of $89,600. And you can see how this is a different approach to looking at the value of the property here. So that's our depreciated value, the $89,600. And like I said, this is a completely different approach to looking at the value of the property. So you have to understand the practicality and the usefulness of these different approaches and what it is that you're really finding when you're using these different approaches to value. The sales comparison, you're finding the market value of a property, what it would probably sell for in normal market conditions. With this approach, however, you're looking at this from a very analytical standpoint of how much is the building worth brand new, how much value has it lost due to how old it is, and what the value of that building is today based on what it was brand new minus the depreciation that it's occurred over the 10 years that this property has existed out of the 50 years it's expected to last. Now, when you're pulling this information all together here, you want to make sure that these numbers are going to be as accurate as possible. You want these actual ages and the effective ages and the economic life and all that information. The more data you have, the more accurate you could actually come up with a depreciated value on this particular property. We're going to take another quick commercial break. If you guys have questions, stick those in the comments. I've gotten them both loaded up right here. I'd love to answer your questions for you. Don't go anywhere. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor. Tampa 10 years ago is nothing like Tampa today. It's changed dramatically over those years, and that's what's really transitioned this to be the number one healthiest housing market in the entire nation.
Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Chrismo, and every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time, we come to you to help you understand, and this show is specifically geared towards our classroom students, our online students, our previous alumni and graduates of the Tampa School of Real Estate, as well as our potential students that are watching out there. We're not going to kick you guys off if you are tuning in on Facebook or the YouTube or our Success Center. So definitely check it out. We've got all of our links down here. If you guys are thinking about getting your real estate license, make sure you check out tampaschool.com. Or if you're trying to prepare for your licensing exam, these videos are a great way to practice, but if you want a little bit more structured, a little bit more oriented way to get this stuff a lot quicker, because there's hours of our Ask the Instructor segments you could watch online, and you could probably drill down a little bit quicker. I know you can with our tools we've got at passfirsttry.com. So definitely check that out, Pass First Try, your guide to passing your class and state exams on the first try. But today what we're talking about is the cost approach, or the cost depreciation approach. And what this is meant to do is basically find the value of a particular property when you're looking at how much it cost to build the property brand new. So we had these 4 different spaces we started off with: the living area, the garage, the utility room, and the patio. And we had these different costs per square foot. So, and this, when you're finding these costs per square footages here, the cost per square footages, you could go really accurate and really granular with this if you're trying to basically track this down to an actual in-depth cost. It's getting a little stormy out here behind us. I don't know if you see that. So when when you get granular and break this down to the very nitty-gritty here, that's where you want to talk to a builder, talk to somebody in construction, talk to a home builder, a developer, and figure out what these numbers actually should look like. And that's how you're going to end up with a very accurate number. Or you could go just really broad and really rough and really vague with this and just pull some figures off of Google. Or if you're taking the exam, these figures are all going to be given to you here. It's going to tell you how much it costs per square foot for each one of these, and you just have to do the calculation. So we've got these different costs per square footages. Then we calculated out our square footages of the living area, the garage, utility room, and the patio of this particular property. And when we multiply those all out, we ended up with these different costs for each one of these different parts of our property, which this is really effective and really great if you're thinking about adding something onto your property. Maybe you want to add some sort of garage, or you want to add a patio. So this is a really good way to kind of estimate how much that's going to cost you out of pocket. I mean, really the best way is to get a quote from a contractor, but you could break that down to something like this here if you're just trying to, in the early stages, the rough stages, you haven't even spent any time talking with somebody yet. So once we found out that brand new cost of the particular building, then we're going to go ahead and apply some depreciation to this, because in this scenario here, if you're looking for the brand new cost of a brand new building, you're done right there. But if you're trying to find the value of a property that isn't necessarily brand new, that's where you apply depreciation. And now let's talk about these age versus the life. Really, we could drop the whole years of this here. So we've got 10 years of age and 50 years of life. Now, in the real world, when you're doing this here, or even if this shows up on your exam, there might be two ages. You might have two different ages on a property. So you'll probably only have one life, one number of years for your life, which let's say that was 50, and that you usually don't have too many different figures for. If you're using this in the real world, you're just trying to estimate how long the building's expected to last. And you could really, again, get very granular with this and very detailed based on the property that you're looking at. If you're looking at a block property, it's going to have a longer lifespan than a wood frame property. It seems pretty common sense, but this is how we're quantifying that information. If we're dealing with a wood frame house, we're going to have a number that's going to be lower. If we're dealing with a block house, it's going to be a number that's higher. Or maybe you're going off of the IRS numbers, which the IRS says for residential properties it's 27.5 years, and for non-residential property it's 39 years. So there's a lot of different ways you could come up with this lifespan number of the property, how long the property is expected to last. But now for your age, there's going to be really two different ages. This effective age and actual age. And it's very important to know the difference between the two of these. And I stress this all the time, especially when you're taking the exam or really anywhere when you're trying to learn something and find out what something means. You got to know what these words mean. Understanding what these words mean will really help you understand what we're talking about here. For effective age, if we think of that word effective, that basically means kind of like almost what is it really? How old does it seem to be? Just like our effective gross income. Our effective gross income is how much income we're really grossing, how much we're really generating on a property, versus the actual age. The actual age is how old it seems to be. But you might have a house that's 50 years old, and you might have a house that's 10 years old. And maybe the 50-year-old house is in better shape than the 10-year-old house. If that's the case, that's going to be where our effective age is really going to help us out here. So in this particular case, we use the 10 years. And if you're trying to figure this out in the real world, you always want to go with the effective age. You really don't need the actual age whatsoever, because maybe our actual age on this property is really 15 years and our effective age was only 10 years. So we don't care about this actual age number. We care about how old the property seems to be. That's what matters, because if the property's been kept up in great shape, this number is going to be lower than how old it really is. If the property is really 15 years old, that's how old it actually is. Its actual age, the real number, is 15 years. But if it's been kept up in good shape, the property might only seem to be 10 years old. And that's the number you want to use when you're calculating out depreciation, because that's going to give you an accurate depreciation estimate based on how depreciated the property really is. And for numbers like this as well, because you might be saying, hey, if I'm trying to do this in the real world, I don't know if I want to trust myself with these numbers and with this information. The more you work with them, the more you work with properties, you'll be able to trust yourself a little bit more. But when you're first getting started and you want to work with some of this stuff, pull up the tax rolls. Get into the realist system, go to hillstax.org, get the tax information, because you'll find this data in there. You'll have like the effective year built, how old the property, basically what it seems like it was built. So that's a really good way to look at this whole effective age matter, because that's really essential. Not going with the actual age. The actual age on this property could really be 100 years old, and it's probably not going to be this big of a difference in the real world. But for our depreciation amount, that's not going to matter, because we're still going off of the effective age. If the life was only 50 years and it's 100 years old, that property should have died like twice already. But if it's been kept up in good shape and they've been doing a lot of maintenance on it, that means we don't have as much depreciation that has occurred on the property. So it's very important to understand this concept, because it gives you a better idea of how the building value could fluctuate over time. Then once we figured out our depreciation percentage, that we lost 20% on this property, that means 20% is used up, we have 80% of its life remaining. 20% is lost to depreciation, 80% remaining. So 20% of our building cost brand new, the $112,000, was $22,400. This is our accrued depreciation, the 20% of the value. Our depreciated value, this number here, that's 80%. Because so out of this 20%, 20% was depreciation. The remaining 80% out of the 100% was the depreciated value. So when we came about this number here, we did the cost of the building, the $112,000, minus our depreciation of $22,400 to get our $89,600 of our depreciated value. But what you could also do is just take this $112,000, multiply by 80%, and that's going to bring you down to $89,600 as well. So either which way you go about calculating this out, they're both going to give you the same number. Whether it's you multiply it by 20% and then subtract that number from the total value, or you just take the total value and multiply it by 80%. That's going to give you down to $89,600 as well. So I just want to go ahead and do a quick couple shout outs here. Mallory messaged us about the exam prep. Mallory, I'll make sure if somebody hasn't gotten in touch with you already, because they should have, but if not, we'll make sure we reach out to you and go over some things we get you to help you pass the exam on the first try. Let's see if we got anybody over here, anything interesting on YouTube. If you guys want to get a shout out on the air here, just go ahead and drop us in a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And of course, if you do have a question as well, we'd love to help you out with that in addition. But now with this cost depreciation approach, well, my computer loads up the page here. So with this cost depreciation approach, basically, we've done everything to find the building value. We figured out how much this building actually cost here. But if we're trying to find the value of this particular property, we still need to factor in the value of the land, how much the land is actually worth on this particular property, and then add that in, because this might be what the building is depreciated down to. But we don't factor in our land yet because land doesn't depreciate in value. Land is always land. Land will always be there. And now this is a theoretical kind of look at this here, because in the real world, land maybe could lose some value, but that's due to market fluctuations, not due to the land being worn out. So we don't calculate depreciation ever for the land. That's in the USPAP, that's in just your general guidelines for pretty much any type of valuation it is that you're doing. You always add the land in last for the cost approach. So once we have our depreciated value of $89,600, our last step basically is figuring the value of the land on this particular property. So let's say that this property that we just figured out, that building that we just figured out, sits on a piece of land that's, let's say the lot is, let's make it nice and big. Let's say the lot is 120 feet by 150 feet. So 120 feet by 150 feet. What's this going to be? 17,000? 18,000. So our 120 feet by 150 feet gives us a land square footage of 18,000 square feet. So 18,000 square feet is the size of our lot here. Pretty good size lot, almost a half acre in this case here. If you remember, an acre is 43,560. Now, what we need to do to figure out what the value of this land is you need a cost per square foot. So it's just like what we were doing initially to find the reproduction cost of the particular building that we're looking at, except for now we're finding the cost of the land. And so you're going to find a cost per square foot for the land in the area. And if it's a low demand area where there's a high supply of land and the land is cheap, the dirt is cheap, you're going to have something very low, maybe a couple of $2 to $3 a square foot. But if you're in a more high demand area, you might have $5 to $10 a square foot for this particular property here. Let's say this is a very high demand area. This is a very high demand area that this property is in, and let's say it's $10 a square foot for the land. And what you also might see for this land word, they might also call it the site. Land and site basically mean the same thing. The site that we're building on or the land that we're building on, you can see how they're interchangeable there. So we've got this 10 square foot for the land of the site. Now, it's 118,000 square feet. So what we're going to do is take this and multiply it by our $10 per square foot, because we've got each one of these square foot cost us $10. And we've got 18,000 of these square feet. So we're going to go ahead and multiply those together, and we're going to end up with $180,000. And you might say, John, how is that possible? How is the building only worth $89,600 and the land $180,000? Is that how this works in most cases? No, in most cases, your building makes up the majority of the value. In this case here, the land cost twice as much as the house that's on the actual land. $180,000, half of that's $90,000. Didn't even cost. It's not the building on there isn't even worth half the value of the land. So for basically finding our total value, what we're going to do is take this depreciated value we found, the $89,600, and we're going to add to that this $180,000 land value. And then we should end up with roughly, what is that, 269,600. So this property, almost $270,000. And out of that $270,000, $180,000 is just the price of that land. So we've got some very worthy land here. And you can see how this method of coming up with the value is very useful and very effective when you're trying to basically break this down into finding out how much of the property actually is land. And with a lot of the development that's going on, especially right now in the South Tampa area where they're buying up these lots and assembling them together and getting some additional value out of the property and so on and so forth, those are definitely a huge number to look at to figure out how much that building is worth. I mean, if we've got land that's worth $180,000 and our building on there is worth about $89,600, that means the entire property is worth about $270,000. So, you know, as a builder trying to buy this piece of land, they're probably going to want to be under that $180,000 for land. Maybe they'll be a little bit over if they've got enough profit in their properties to cover that and they really need this piece of land. But this really factors in quite a bit here. The understanding all of this here, especially when you're building out and developing property. So that would be our entire cost of the property. Typically, it's not this skewed. Typically, that would maybe be your cost of the building, and that would be the land. That's how it normally works in most cases. But if we have a very high demand area, the land's going to be worth significantly more. Maybe this is an older property that's on this piece of land. It's been kept up in good shape, so we don't have that much depreciation going on with it, but it's nowhere near the properties that are around it. So you can see how there's an opportunity here for this $180,000 lot to maybe put something a little bit better on it. And then you could go back, refigure out the cost to actually build some sort of larger property on it, factor in your demo cost into all this here, and then find out what kind of profit you can make as an investor building some sort of building on top of this land. We'll talk some more about how you could use this approach for all kinds of different ways. This helps out a lot when you're a developer, you're a builder, you're thinking about building or developing or investing in property. But we're going to take another quick break. Again, put your comments and questions in the chat line. And thank you guys for liking and subscribing and sharing the stream. We're going to be right back after this short break. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Ask the Instructor. Tampa 10 years ago is nothing like Tampa today. It's changed dramatically over those years, and that's what's really transitioning this to be the number one healthiest housing market in the entire nation.
Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Christman, and this show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time, we come to you, to our past students, to our current students, whether you're in our classroom or online courses, or maybe you're just a potential student. You're thinking about starting a career in real estate, or maybe just getting yourself a little side hustle to make some money in your spare time. Real estate is a really flexible area. A lot of different ways you can make money here, a lot of potential, especially in the Tampa area right now. If you guys didn't watch our State of Real Estate episode we did back on last Friday, we do Fridays every Friday, 12 noon Eastern Time, State of Real Estate, and last Friday we were talking about how Tampa's ranked currently the #1 housing market in the healthiest housing market in the entire nation. And that gives you a lot of confidence when you're thinking about investing in real estate, or you're thinking about starting a career in real estate, when you're wondering, hey, I saw Tampa go through some big ups and downs in the past. Is that going to happen again? Well, according to The Economist, we're ranked #1 healthiest in the country right now. So if the ship is going down, we're going to be the last ones to go down, basically, is what that healthiest housing market is kind of saying, if everything holds standard with all of that there. So that's great news for the Tampa Bay area. If you've been following what's going on in the Tampa area, there's all kinds of great stories about what they're doing in Channelside, the West River project, the complete rehab they're planning on down the whole Nebraska corridor, all the development that's going down in South Tampa, all the development that's in our suburban areas like Wesley Chapel, that's in Fishhawk, that's in all these communities that surround the Tampa Bay area. So really healthy in Tampa right now. Great time to get into real estate as well as invest in real estate, and give us a call or send us a text message or check out our website. Any of those little fancy little links you see at the bottom of this video, and we can answer any questions you do have. But let's get back down to the nuts and bolts of today. We're talking about the cost approach. And the cost approach basically allows you to take the building value, how much it costs to build something brand new, apply some depreciation to it, then add in our value of the land, and we come up with what that property would be worth today. So, and if you guys are just tuning in for this here, make sure you subscribe to our Success Center. If you're on YouTube watching this, hit the subscribe button. You'll be able to see the whole archive of this entire episode, as well as all of our previous episodes on our Success Center at tampaschool.com, on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page. You'll see all these recordings on there, free for you guys to watch until we decide to take them down. So make sure you go through and watch as many of those as you can. No plans to take them down, but you never know. So we came up with this value of $269,600. And before we went on the break, we were basically figuring what our property basically can help us understand, what this value is going to help us understand when we're looking at a property. And we're talking a lot about these development projects that are going in the Tampa Bay area, where they're taking these lots. So maybe there's this property that, using the cost approach, it's $269,600. And out of that cost approach, we find the building to be worth $89,600. Now, typically, you've got this 80-20 rule where it applies. Now, this is just a rule of thumb more so than the actual than an actual accurate measure. But again, for getting rough estimates, this is going to be really helpful. So if a building is typically worth 80% of the value of a property and the land is typically worth 20%, let's see what our potential is on this property, on this $180,000 lot, what the home value should look like in this neighborhood here. So we've got our $180,000 property. And now what you would normally do here, if you wanted to find 80% of this price here, you'd multiply that by 80%, you'd end up with $180,000. But this should only be worth about 20%, typically. That's your rule of thumb, that the land is typically worth maybe 15, 20, 10%, maybe 25%. Let's go down as low as 10%. So let's see if the land is worth 10% here, what we could maybe potentially build out on this property. So if we take this $180,000 and divide it by 10%, 0.10, we're going to end up with $1.8 million. Now, like I said, it's good to find a range. We're finding it based off the land being worth 10%. Let's say the land gets as high as maybe 25% of the value, so we get a good, accurate range here, because you never want to just go off of one number. Whenever you have a range of numbers, that's a lot more trustworthy. So we take $180,000, divide that by 0.25, we get about $720,000. So we've got in between, this property really has a potential to be worth between $720,000 and $1.8 million. But yet, due to the inferior building that's built on this property here, it's only ended up being worth $269,600. So if you're an investor looking at this, you're like, hey, there's this high demand area. Yeah, I'm going to pay $180,000 for this particular lot, but if in the area, the homes are going for anywhere between 10 to 25% of the value of the property being the land, that tells you this property could be worth $720,000 to up to almost $2 million, $1.8 million. So, I mean, even if you're paying this price right here, you got some good potential, but what you got to do is be able to build a property that's going to live up to a $2 million price point. And that you can see, especially if there's a $270,000 house in the area right now, you're probably not going to get this high. That's why you want to use the range with these numbers here, because you're probably going to be looking a little bit more so closer to that $720,000. You got to use some common sense when you're figuring out these values as well. These numbers that you could come up are really good, but that's why I recommend coming up with a range of what you could come up here, anywhere from 10 to 25%. So I would say in this case here, if we've got a $270,000 property, we're maybe closer to the $720,000 being that price point we could get to if we build a nice enough property on this particular piece of land. So this is super useful. The more you get to work with this, the more you play with these numbers, the more it can kind of show you and open your eyes to the potential that's out there when you're investing in properties, or as a real estate professional when you're advising investors. The investment category is huge, especially in the Tampa Bay area right now. There's a lot of investors wanting to invest their money in the Tampa Bay area, or maybe a lot of people that just have money that want to invest and they have no idea how to invest. So you know what they're going to look for? They're going to look for a qualified professional who could walk them through this investment process. Maybe they've got some equity in their home and they want to turn that equity into an investment. So this is a great way to look at it. Or if you're in the home building or construction industry, this is definitely math that you want to know if you want to invest in real estate as well. So this cost approach is really huge. And I tell this to students all the time. And like, yeah, you're going to learn a lot of laws and rules in your real estate licensing course, but you're also going to learn a lot of these applicable principles and practices that are going to help you, whether it's you're investing in property or whether you're just buying a home for yourself, to better understand and make sure you're not overpaying for a particular property. Even if you're still using a realtor, which that's another benefit of getting your real estate license, you could go out and sell your own property and basically keep the commission for yourself, or you could basically route the commission. If you're a buyer, you could take that extra 3% or 2% or 4% or whatever it's negotiated out for that and have that go towards your down payment. So there's a lot of potential with the real estate license and how this could help positively influence your life or your business, whether that's investing or whatever it may be. So definitely give us a call. Phone number is 813-928-0106. You can also text us at that number, 928-0106. We've got our exam prep tools at passfirsttry.com. So passfirsttry.com. That's got our whole recommended strategy. If you're trying to take the state exam, don't take the state exam without looking at passfirsttry.com, because we've got a lot of info on there for you to help you pass your real estate exams on the first try. And then overall, if you're just trying to find a career in real estate, just go to tampaschool.com. We've got everything on there. You can subscribe to our Success Center. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. If you guys are watching this after the fact and watching the recording, still put your comments in, because we go back and we read those. We look at every single comment and we try to respond to every single one as well. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern time, for next week's episode of Ask the Instructor. Tampa 10 years ago is nothing like Tampa today. It's changed dramatically over those years, and that's what's really transitioning this to be the number one healthiest housing market in the entire nation.
Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com.
Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching.